from onboarding, we're going to move to someone leaving the company. Now, there are lots of reasons why someone leaves. Maybe they feel unfulfilled. Maybe there's a mismatch in salary expectations. Maybe they want to have a change in their career, right? I want to throw this one to Elvin. What's the first step for employers to debug on this? And what approach should they take to retain talents?
Giving me the toughest questions. I would have been more comfortable with onboarding. That's what we do. Yeah. So in terms of, I think your question is more centered around employee dissatisfaction, right? There are a lot of nuances to it, so it goes both ways. Maybe we start on the more from the employee side. I think we are all employees here ourselves, right? Some are self-employed, still employee, right? I have many friends who are psychologists. Growing up, right, in uni, I meet our friends with psych degrees. The one thing that they do ask their patients with depression or mental health issues is, do you have anything to look forward to, right? Do you have anything to look forward to? And why is that important, right? As employees, we all want to feel like we have a place in our company. We're contributing some way or some form or way into our organization. And we want progression. In life, there's always progression, right? You feel a car going from 0 to 70, you feel acceleration, but you don't feel velocity. You don't feel constant velocity, right? So we always want that kind of progression. And if there's a mismatch in expectations in terms of how the employee can grow, the employee's salaries, right, then that kind of leads to dissatisfaction. I'm sure we've all had our bouts. We're all working professionals. We've had our bouts where we feel like there's nothing in it for us in an organization. It's too mundane, right? Work takes up about 8 hours a day, right? We spend 8 hours, the other 8 hours sleeping, and we have 8 hours free to ourselves. Literally, work takes half of our days. Some maybe more, maybe for you and you're a founder, right? So maybe you 16 hours a day, you just sleep, right? After that. But for most of us, work takes up half of the day or more. And if it's something that's unfulfilling, uninspiring, and we find it's going nowhere, definitely we'll be satisfied. From an employer point of view, right? If you look at the salaries in Singapore, it's not going lower by the years, right? Typical software engineer now costs maybe 100K, right? Mid junior to mid level, around that. Not many employers will be able to match that kind of salary to build their platforms, right? So maybe it could be time to find talent from a different place overseas where things could be a little cheaper due to cost of living, right? So let's say hiring from Vietnam, hiring from Thailand, hiring from Philippines, right? Because of the fact that cost of living there is lower, salaries there are going to be lower as well. You will most likely find an employee that's going to be satisfied with what you're going to be offering. And for you, you have a lot of runway to kind of provide that progression for them, right? And that is kind of where Shameless Multiplier comes in, right? Because we help companies to onboard in countries where you don't have it, right? So let's say tomorrow you're trying to onboard someone in Thailand. You realize that, oh, I need a nominee director there. Who am I going to find to hold my shares there, right? If you use a solution like Multiplier, you don't have to. You simply take care of payroll, compliance. You just need to identify the candidate there, which, according to the chat, I think is the main concern in this webinar, how to find good talent, right? Maybe you can get to that. But the onboarding phase, we simplify everything in terms of payroll, in terms of compliance, in terms of entity setup. You don't have to set up entity. And we work with companies like Veremark and Esevel, right? So Veremark, some of our customers require background checks, referring to Veremark. If let's say you want to provide a laptop to someone in Thailand, right? Sometimes the salaries there can cost as much as a MacBook Pro, So you can't ask the employee to front the cost, right? You got to buy it for them. But if you buy it for them, you ship it there, you incur some form of customs taxes, right? That's where a company like Esevel comes in, where you just get them to say, hey, I'm going to purchase a laptop for you, deliver it for me in Thailand. There's that. So I do digress, but in essence, there are definitely two facets to it, right? Because we're all human. Employee side as well as employer side, there are things that you need to consider. I think if we are fair to each other, things are going to work out nice.
Nice. So being fair to each other along those lines. All right. This next question is, I think it's super interesting because it's on a trend, which I think most of you have heard of. It's called quiet quitting. So it's like quitting, but not really. Basically, you're doing the bare minimum of your job and you are putting in no more time, effort, or enthusiasm than necessary. It was a trend back in 2022, but my hunch is it seems to still be going on. I would love all of the panelists' take on this. What's your take on it, and how should companies address this, especially in a remote setting? Alec, I would love to hear from you first.
Yeah, I think, the most important place to start is think about the underlying reasons which might give rise to quiet quitting. I think Alvin referenced some of those in the previous answer, but are people bought into the company and its direction? Are the right people in the right roles? Are the leaders and managers effective? Are the people happy with their pay and progression? All those things, or any one of those things can contribute to creating any dissatisfaction where people aren't wanting to put in the effort. One of the areas I referenced there, I think I'm particularly passionate about, is all around pay and progression. And I think this is one of the topics that I think is easy to, especially as a startup, to think we're not a big company, we'll do it later on. But those sort of things, if you don't have the structures around competency frameworks, leveling frameworks, compensation bands, will lead to inconsistent outcomes. And if you have inconsistent outcomes, that can cause, essentially employees to, not be so happy because they're seeing either inconsistent outcomes or perceived inconsistent outcomes. And it's all those sort of things that you just want to really diagnose, so you can essentially remove distractions and get people wanting to really, be invested in their role and their contribution to what you're trying to do as an organization. So root cause is, the first step, of course. Work out what's going on in your particular business and do those things to help ward that off. The other element is also the role that your performance processes has to play in this. I don't believe it's possible to have a great workplace if you don't strive for a high performance culture. And to me, a high performance culture means setting specific and measurable goals, ensuring review processes are comprehensive and objective, and learning and continuous feedback, whereby managers are encouraged to provide ongoing feedback during one-to-ones. If you're able to achieve all of those things, then you should be able to mitigate the risk of quiet quitting, because it will be clear if you've got any individuals that are not contributing in line with their objectives.
Nice. So setting structure, that two-way street for the employees as well. Yu-Ying, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that quiet quitting, especially among teams that are being run remotely, right, it is quite a big problem. And we've seen situations before where it is not just that the employee starts to take a back seat in their own role, but we found that they actually started doing multiple jobs. So they might be, having a stable income on one, but then having like a side gig on the other, or even like full-time jobs, right? So we helped our clients to look into those, found audit logs and event logs that indicated that these kind of things were actually happening. So it is a very big danger. Definitely agree with Alec. I think a lot of it is, does the employee identify with the mission of the company in the first place? But just to bring in like another perspective as well, I think what we've found is that, especially when hiring for remote teams, the selection of the candidates themselves is also quite important. So through various trials and errors, we have firmed up on a kind of candidate profile that I feel really does well in a kind of remote team setting. And that is like someone with a certain amount of maturity. Now, maturity doesn't mean in terms of age. So you can still have someone who's young, but who's still quite mature in their outlook. Someone who is self-directed, and someone who takes ownership of things, right? And somebody as well who's able to communicate well in whatever the medium of language is. So if it's English, it should be this person is able to speak well in English as well as write and communicate well in English. So I think that kind of like candidate spectrum is really important for us. I think back to Alex's point, another two more things we really found to be helpful. And one is like setting the kind of North Star metric, right? How does the employee know that he or she has done well? So they do not want to wait until the end of the year when you decide how much performance bonus to give them or whether to give them a salary increase to find out at that stage. So we do a lot of like, OKRs, like setting of OKRs, setting of company goals for the end of the year so that they know what their part is to play towards achieving that goal. Right. And then the third thing is really like engagement with the employees. So we try to do that with more frequency. Within our company itself, we do like daily stand-ups. So at least like even if you're working by yourself and say, for example, Hong Kong or like the Philippines, you get to see a group of people around you like every morning and you know what everyone else is doing. Right. And we also have monthly one-on-ones as well. And sometimes I also travel around the region to meet my colleagues face to face. So I do think that those things taken together can really help to increase like the bonds between colleagues in the company and help to keep and retain people better.
Nice. Alvin, on to you.
Yeah, so at Multiplier, we're a remote first company, right? Remote first, meaning literally all our employees, we have 450 employees. They're all based in 60 different countries, 40 different nationalities, right? We see each other on Zoom all the time or Slack, right? And remote can be a benefit. Yes, it can. It can also be a detriment or downfall of a company quiet quitting, right? So it's really a double-edged sword, right? And I find that the reason why I feel like I did well, I don't want to toot my own horn, but why I did well was because I was very lucky to have a really, really, you guys keep laughing, really good and dedicated manager that consistently checks in on my growth, right, and over communicates with me. So I think this is something that you should implement to your organizations if you haven't already, right? Hiring the right managers, firstly, because these are the ones that your employees will be listening to and following. And you see a lot of cases where the manager goes and so does the worker, right? They're like besties, right? And the thing is, we don't get to see each other face to face in a remote first company, right? Sometimes you text someone on Slack or message, the tone gets lost in translation. It's always good to over communicate, right? And it goes both ways with colleagues and top down, right? Over communicate your goals, your aspirations, what you are looking for in the company, and at the same time, the managers and your upper management, they have to take responsibility and set a clear goal. You can't say like, oh, you're just going to be here for 10 years, nothing's going to happen to you, no raises, nothing. Then again, you have nothing to look forward to building off the previous point, right? Chances of you staying are quite low. So I think these two things are very, very crucial. Hiring the right managers to manage your remote workers and also to over communicate your requirements on both ends.
Nice. Yeah, I resonate with the over communicating part. As I mentioned, iterative is also remote first. So sometimes even telling people there are no updates, that is still an update, which is helpful for all of us to know. All right, folks, we are at the end of the panel. I want to do this question style, which is rapid fire. All of you have shared really great insights with the audience today. And if there's only one thing you want people to take away from, what is it? The rule is you can only answer this with one sentence. It can be a long sentence, but it has to be one sentence. Yu-Ying, I will start with you.
I mean, I would assume that I think most people here have already bought into the remote work kind of theory. But if you've not, I think it's really something that a lot of companies should try out, right? And the reason why I say this is because remote work really forces you to mature as a company or as a founder or as a HR manager, because you have to set up the processes. It has to be transparent. There has to be standards. And these are all the things that larger companies have to do. So if you were to set it up when you're a smaller company, it sets you in good stead really to continue scaling up along the same trajectory. So definitely would recommend it to anyone here in the room to try this out if you have not already done so.
Nice. Alec?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I said at the first question. While it's crucial to understand the cultural differences among a globally distributed remote workforce, it's also important to remember that as humans, we're more similar than different. So if you focus on those universal principles and values, you'll create a healthy workplace wherever your people are situated.
Don't take your messaging for granted, over communicate, and always have something to look forward to in work-wise, right? On both ends, employer and employee.
Nice. All right, folks, we're gonna transition into Q&A. Thank you for the recap. Those were definitely some long sentences. We have a couple of great questions from people, and I want to take some time to go through them. We have some in the chat, and then we have some pre-submitted questions as well. But I want to go through the ones in the chat first, since folks are already here. So I'm going to read out the questions out loud, and then I'm gonna direct it to some of you. But if there's one question you want to answer and I didn't call on you, please feel free to chime in. So I wanted to start with this question from Anil, who is from India, who is at India. One of the biggest challenges I am facing today is finding the right talent in Southeast Asian markets like Singapore, Malaysia, and other countries. What are the few initiatives which companies outside this region are adopting while setting up teams in the Southeast Asian region? I'm going to throw this one to Elvin.
Well, there are a few methods to do this, right? Let's say I'm assuming that you're hiring from outside of the C region. So maybe you're hiring from the US, you're hiring from the UK, Europe, European region, right? Well, there are two ways you can do it. Firstly, if you're talking about a logistical point of view, I'm going to answer it from there, right? The two ways you can do it: you can open an entity, right? You definitely have to open an entity and then hire people as full-time employees under your company, and then go through the process of setting up the bank account, go through the process of reading up labor laws, hiring nominee directors, putting shares, putting money into these countries, just to expand into those markets. The alternative would be to use an EOR like Multiplier, where you don't have to use an entity, simply identify the candidate and hire over there. If you have challenges finding candidates, which is, I mean, typically the biggest challenge that everyone faces, that's why that headhunters exist, right? That's why there's a job for recruiters. If you are having trouble with finding local talent or understanding the recruitment process or the nuances of talents in these foreign countries, there are always local recruitment firms that you can turn to, right? You don't really have to go to LinkedIn. I mean, to me, I'm an advocate for that for LinkedIn platform, because that's how I found my job. Right? I feel like it's very, very useful. A lot of people out there. Alternatively, there are organizations, companies that you can go to, that Multiplier we work with, that I can refer you to, that are already based in each country. Let's say in Singapore and Vietnam, there's a company called Multiplier. In the EU, there's a company called Stratman, right? And all these people, they have certain niches in hiring for job scopes, for geography as well. So you can leverage these players in each country. Hope that.
Right. Yu-Ying?
Completely agree with Elvin, and we do use Noteflare as well. So basically what they'll do for you is that they'll help you to source candidates. And if you do provide the kind of filters that you have, so for example, if you're hiring for a developer, you might want them to sit for a test before being elevated up to like the first interview with you. They can also help you to do the filtering as well. And I think one thing to point out is that recruiters do tend to specialize in certain countries in Southeast Asia. So you might have recruiter A that specializes in Singapore, Malaysia, another recruiter that specializes in the Philippines, and then a third recruiter that specializes in Indonesia and Malaysia, for instance. So I think working with if you do plan to hire across multiple Southeast Asian countries, I think it's good to work with employer of record such as Multiplier, because they'll be able to help to direct you to the right recruiter for the right region.
All right. Okay, let's move on to the next question. This is a big one. How do you figure out the best candidate among hundreds of applications? Alec, I need to hear your answer to this.
Yeah, and you think about the traditional approach to recruitment, which is reviewing people's CVs or LinkedIn profiles, cover letters, those sort of things. You know, that's not an easy thing to do if you've got positions which are receiving a huge number of applications. You've also got to ask yourself, is that the most objective method to being able to assess all those people? Does everyone who's applied get a fair chance? You know, are there unconscious biases that your recruiters are applying when trying to, you know, look through all those applications? So I'm a big believer in whereby you have those roles which do attract a lot of applications, trying to build in the right flows that can give everyone an equal shot and help you filter. There are new AI tools that you can use that will do this. We've gone down the route of using Test Gorilla for many of our roles, which essentially, when people apply, we'll direct them through to a skills assessment. We'll explain what the process is, gives everyone an equal shot. It's there to, you know, unbias the process, and therefore we then have a flow whereby for many of these roles we can then just look at how people are scoring the test's key sort of, you know, competencies, problem solving, communication, that kind of thing. Enabling us to really go, okay, we're now going to concentrate on the top 5-10% of people that scores, thereby being able to filter, but also giving that objective chance to everyone rather than, you know, just going through all those CVs. And one of the tips there, if you do go with Test Gorilla, for example, they do have a free tier. So if you're, you know, if you're working with your talent budgets, you know, there's a free tier that is pretty useful that you can use until you want to start expanding the packages and getting more customized. But yeah, I think looking at those kind of methods to be able to you know, automate that queue while also producing consistent outcomes, I think is really important.
Right. Yu-Ying, do you have other thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Alec, you know, it'd be cool if you could tell us what AI kind of like assessment tools you use as well. You mentioned that you have tried some AI tools. I'll be interested to see what that is. From my perspective, we do review a lot of CVs and it can be very, very tiring to do so. So what we started implementing about 6 months ago is something which is what we call a scorecard. Because I realized that one of the things when we were recruiting for like the earlier positions was that we ourselves didn't, or the hiring manager didn't exactly know what we wanted. So we were evaluating all of those CVs and saying, oh, this one looks good, this one looks interesting, but there was no objective like kind of criteria to evaluate it by. So we adopted the scorecard. And so before each hiring manager goes out to do hiring, we would require to see exactly, you know, what are the things, the top 3 things you want this person to achieve by the end of his or her first year, right? Laid down in like detail with like data and so on. So once we have that objective measurement, we would look through the CVs to see whether this candidate has done such a thing before or would be on track to achieve such a thing. And I find that it helps us to whittle down the applications by a lot because there is now an objective measurement for what we're looking for.
Nice. Alec, did you want to respond on the AI part?
Yeah, I haven't actually tried it out myself. So as I said, the main tool we're using is Test Gorilla, which isn't an AI specific tool. The one that I saw at a recent conference I was at is Sapia AI, which is built in Australia, where I'm based. But it is certainly, you know, those AI interviewing tools are something that I definitely want to look at. The thing I'm really interested in is, do they provide a good candidate experience as well? Because there is always that hesitancy that if you do have these sort of tools at the start of your interviewing process, it's not the most human approach to hiring, right? And we are humans. We want to attract people that will work well together, right? And if your first experience of a company is automation, skills assessment AI tools, is that the best? Is that the best approach? So it's something that I really want to sort of assess more. I haven't gone deep into all the new AI tools, but we're using, yeah, as I said, Test Gorilla, which isn't so an AI tool; it's just skills assessments. But yeah, Sapient AI was the one that sort of caught my interest and want to look more into it.
All right, let's move on to the next question, and this is from Rofia from Indonesia. Curious how you guys face security issue as a global team and in the global market. For example, many US companies prefer hiring locals regarding security concerns, or maybe the company does not allow their employees to work out of the US region. What do you think about it as a global team? And like, I feel like, sorry, Elvin, I think this is up your alley.
Sure. Great. So in terms of security, well, there are different aspects, right? If you're talking about laptop cybersecurity, which I think this is where the conversation is going. Well, there's always a vendor like Esevel that you can use, right? So let's say you're hiring someone in the Philippines from the US, and you feel like you need some form of MDM on your laptop, right? Partners like Esevel, they do that for you, right? So before the laptop goes to your employee, or when the laptop goes to your employee, they have a bunch of steps that they have to take to set up the laptop and onboard, so that information on the laptop cannot be, how to say, sensitive information on the laptop cannot be transferred out, right? Or there's a remote wiping service from the MDM, something like that. So that's how you attain this kind of security. In terms of how we do it in Multiplier, so the laptop that I'm currently on, right, it has an MDM on it. So anytime if I piss my founder off, maybe he'll wipe my entire laptop, something like that, right? That's what an MDM does, right? And that's how we have SOC Type 2 compliance, right? One of them being that that there's a checklist that I had to go through. But this is installed in my laptop, that's installed in my laptop. I sign a waiver that says that I cannot leave my laptop outside alone, because we are handling sensitive employee data, right? So there are certain certifications and verifications that you can get, and companies that can help you to get them in terms of security and adherence to security, right? To address the other point, they say that, oh, yeah, someone say something.
No, I think you're good.
Okay. In terms of the other aspect, where companies are still not allowing their employees to work outside of the US, that's going to be more of a company direction. So if let's say Yuying is very, very opposed to working on site, you can't really change your mind and say that everyone's going to return to office, right? So the flip side, the converse is going to be true. If you're not open to remote working, if you're not open to expanding your team overseas, then maybe this is not a solution for you, right? But if it's something that you're willing to try, the message is that there are tools, there are means, there are ways that can make it very, very, very easy for you. Very practical as well, and at the same time secure. I hope that answers the question, Rafia.
Nice. Yeah, Rofia, let us know if you want more details. We're going to move on to some questions that we have received prior from folks who couldn't make it to the event. So let's go through some of them now. The first one is how to attract passive talent outside the network. This is from 𝐶𝐶𝐶𝐿𝐿, who is a senior manager talent acquisition. Yuying, how do we attract passive talent?
Yeah, I understand why the question is being asked. And, for us, I guess those would be the most attractive candidates as well, right? Because if you think about it, the most competent and the person that performs best in their role would probably be happily still employed in their role and would therefore be passive talent. And so you would want to reach out to people like that. Now, what I can just share from experience, what I've heard other founders or other HR managers or talent recruiters tell me, which is that they actively spend time on LinkedIn with search filters and actively trawl through profiles every day. And of course, there's some automation tools that can help you to do it as well. So some have even gone to the extent of developing their own algorithm, right, to determine whether this is an attractive candidate. And if so, reach out to that person to say, hey, why don't we just do an initial no obligations kind of call, just to see how you are. And from then on, they would have a pipeline of like ready talents that if in the future they ever had a job that suited that talent, they can reach out to that talent, and the talent would already have an initial connection with them and might be a bit more incentivized to join. So that is what I've heard from my experience, but I do not have like, any kind of practice or practical experience that I can share with regards to this.
Right. Alvin or Alec, anything to add? How to attract passive talent? Oh, now we can move on. Okay, let's move on to the next question, which I think is quite a big one. So this is from Laimai, who is in talent acquisition. So the question is, according to your viewpoint, what are the difficulties when attracting talent in 2024? As well as, can you give predictions for the labor market in 2025? Big one. I always give the toughest questions to Alvin first. Alvin.
To be honest, I don't know why. Yuying and Alec, they have way more experience than me. But okay, if you want my 2 cents, sure. How to attract talent, right? I think this ties in very smoothly with the predictions for 2025. Why do I say that? We now see that there is a sort of shift in the employer-employee dynamic, right? I have a whole macroeconomic theory on this, right? Something to do with inflation rates, but let's maybe cut to the chase. The point is that in 2025, even now, it's going to be an employer market, right? The reason why remote working was even a thing was because of COVID. And during COVID, you see that it was an employee market. So in Google, they literally hired fresh grads and give them a pat on the back with exorbitant salaries. That's why you see there are a lot of tech layoffs, right? And with tech layoffs, what's going to happen is there's going to be a shift in supply. And now there are a lot of engineers that are out there looking for jobs. A lot of people out there looking for remote jobs, right? So the person with demand and supply is changing. Now employers get to call the shots. Maybe not so nice for us to hear, but the truth is the truth, right? And what that happens is, with that, maybe remote work might not be seen as this kind of benefit anymore. People want return to office. People want a more traditional approach to things, right? And so what's going to happen is now remote work is going to be even more coveted. If you're going to offer that, you're going to be one of the top companies to be attracting and retaining talent, right? The amount of people looking for remote options are still there. However, the amount of people providing it significantly lower because the employers get to call the shots. So quite ironic. In 2025, I see that maybe people are going to return to office even more. And it's always going to be cyclical, right? There's going to be too many people returning to office, and all of a sudden, maybe all the employees do a mass quitting again, and it returns to employee market again. And then you see a rise in remote work again. It's just going to be cyclical, right? And that being said, if you want to stand out as an employer now and next year, this hybrid or remote model is going to make you very attractive.
Nice. Alec, what do you think?
I don't have too much to add, I don't think, because I think that was really well answered by Alvin. I don't think there's a right or wrong as a business, whether you decide to be remote or fully in person or hybrid. That's a decision that you can make as a business, and there are different trade-offs. I really am a fan of hybrid and remote working because it enables people to work on their own terms. You can prioritize things like diversity because people may prefer to work from home, may need to work from home for different reasons. So I think there's a real advantage there. But to Alvin's point, with those two trends where COVID's in the past, it has really shifted to more of an employer-focused market, given interest rate changes and those sort of things. You see it or in so many companies that are reversing those trends. I got a message from a friend today that said he moved out of town because he could work remotely. So he's an hour and a half out of Sydney, And now his company are saying that he's got to be in the office 3 days a week, not one. So what was his message? Guess I'm looking for another job then. So, you know, those trends I think will play out. And as a business, you've just got to work out, what do you want to be as a business? If you want to go fully back in the office, or, you know, dictate that people are in an office more, so that's your choice. But no, that comes with trade-offs. And, you know, you might choose to go down the route that Alvin was saying, whereby you go remote, and you know, that's a real advantage to those people that are, you know, needing to return to work because of those employers.
Right. Yu-Ying, what do you think? Agree, disagree?
Yeah, I mean, to Alex's point, right? We do see that when we advertise the job roles and we put prominently over there, like these are remote positions, we get really, really quality candidates. And when I do the interview with them and I ask them, you know, why are you interested in our company? Like, one of the reasons that always comes up is because you guys are remote first. And I then find out from them, many of these candidates are based out of the Philippines or Indonesia, right? I then find out that they're actually spending 3 to 4 hours each day just commuting into office, right? And it's terrible to think that 3 to 4 hours of your time each day is being wasted, being stuck in traffic. So I can understand very well that they would rather be putting this time to, you know, to better use, right? Exercising, spending time with their family, or even spending more time at work. So I do think it's a mentality shift. As Alec was saying, I don't think that there's a right or wrong answer. I think every founder, every business person has to find the right answer for themselves. What is it that they're comfortable with? But definitely, I think in terms of the attractiveness of an employer to employees, remote work would be one of the benefits that a lot of people looking for jobs would be looking out for.
Nice. All right, we're down to the last 2 questions. This one is by Robbie, who is a HR officer. This is quite tactical. So, how to become an effective HR practitioner? Alec, what do you think?
Yeah, I think if I think about my career, I came through the talent acquisition recruitment channel, and I got thrown into a role whereby I suddenly led a people function, which, you know, trial by fire, basically. So, you know, there is a degree of, you know, opportunity out there where you've just got to seize it and learn, like anything, right? If you're a problem solver, then you will learn. So just keep tackling problems, and you'll be effective in whatever you do. But as a sort of practical advice, one of the sort of the things that hugely helped me at the start of my career when moving into the HR world, I read the book Work Rules by Laszlo Bock. So he was the ex-SVP of Google, and they did a whole heap of research. I referenced it before with the Project Oxygen of eight traits of effective management. There's a whole heap of absolute gold through that book. You know, it's a number of years old now, but it still holds true. You know, if you think about HR and organizations, it hasn't, you know, fundamentally changed too much. Like, we're not solving, you know, problems of science, right? It's not physics, it's not rocket science. But there are some key practical things that, you know, if you think about the values of thinking about what do you want to represent as an HR professional, you know, it's not just about dictating what management want. It's actually about thinking your role is, you've got 2 stakeholders. You've got the people, and you've got the leaders in the business, essentially. So how do you make sure that you are balancing those to provide consistent outcomes and ultimately build great workplaces? But practical advice, read that book, Work Rules. It doesn't mean you'll apply everything in your organization, but it gives really good principles of how to think about people and talent, and how to structure people functions. And I still reference it to my day. I've got an old book of it that's, you know, shredded up, that I still look through when I'm thinking about things. So definitely worth reading that book.
All right. Thank you, Alec. All right, last question. This is from Pavarti, who is in technical recruitment. I think, Alec, you touched on this a little bit, but the question is how to give opportunities without any bias, only based on experience and expertise. I would love to hear Yu-Ying's take on this.
Well, I'm pretty sure Alec has a much better kind of answer to this than I do. I mean, for us, I think as a company, I would like to think that most of my colleagues, we actually 70% of the people in my company are women. So definitely, I think with regards to gender biases, we don't have much of those. Yeah. I would say I would defer actually to Alec. He might be a better person to answer this question, given he probably does it every day.
Alec, the people wants to hear from you.
Yeah, it's another area that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. So, if you think about it, you've got to think about the whole recruitment process. The element that I was talking about before for skills assessment, which can debias the traditional CV review, which can be subjective and that kind of thing. That's one step of the process, but you've got to also think about the whole process. And I'm passionate about structured interview processes whereby you look at what practical exercises can you actually implement through those hiring processes. Because if you think about it, how an interview process is not necessarily a great reflection of how you're going to be in that job. It's a reflection of how well you talk about yourself to do that job, which is not necessarily the same thing. I've had interviews in my past where I wanted the job so bad that I just crumbled, and that happens. Interviews are stressful situations. So if I think about how you really focus on both candidate experience and also debiasing, it's all about how do you structure interview processes so that you're testing the core skills. That can be achieved through things like initial skills assessments, practical exercises, and skills tests throughout those processes. Also just interviews. Make sure you have structured sets of questions. Make sure you can educate the interviewers on how to conduct structured interviews. So you're asking the same questions to every single candidate and those sort of things. So there's a whole heap of ways. There's platforms that do this stuff in quite a radical way, where if you look at Applied as a platform, is like an ATS, which rather than looking at CVs, they get people to write 5 separate questions, and then the reviewers review each individual question, randomized order, and gives a score. So then the platform gives an overall score, and then that then automates the next process. So there's different ways you can do it, but really think about the whole interview process. How can you make it consistent for every single applicant? How can you have structured interviews? How can you really assess the core competencies for that role? So identify what those key skills are that person's going to need, and make sure you design your interview process to assess those in an objective way.
Nice. All right, folks, we are near 4:50 p.m. So we're going to wrap things up. Thank you, panelists. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. I learned a lot, and I hope the audience did too. As we wrap things up, it would be great for the audience to know how to reach out to you. So I'm going to go with Alvin. Where can people find you?
I don't work for LinkedIn, but you can find me on LinkedIn. I know I've referenced them quite a bit this call. So you may type in my name, Alvin Dimitri Lee. The Dimitri is spelled D-M-I-T-R-I. Alternatively, you may drop me an email at alvin.dimitri@usemultiplier.com. I'll type my email in the Yu Ying has done all that for us. Great. Thank you.
Lovely. I know the links are there, but I'm just gonna continue asking anyway. Alec, where can people find you?
Definitely LinkedIn. I lost control of my email inbox some time ago. So yeah, find me on LinkedIn.
Nice. Yu Ying?
Definitely, connect with me on LinkedIn. Love meeting new people on LinkedIn, but I've also put in my email address, which is wrong. And let me do it again. Yeah, so you can also email me as well as yuying@esevel.com.
Lovely. All right, that's it, folks. A special shout out to Multiplier, Veremark, and Esevel for creating this event, and of course for having me as your host. Lastly, to the audience, thank you for hanging out with us and for all of your questions. I believe an email will be sent to you guys with more details, so please check your emails. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. See you all.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.